We'll get to the Dolphins in just a second, but I think it's my alumni duty to proclaim this University of Miami football team the worst I've ever seen. 8 turnovers. You've beaten Duke the last 2 times you played them, 95-10. They come into your building. 8 turnovers. I've just never seen such a thing. When they lost to Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, with the loss that Jimmy Johnson calls the worst of his entire career, the one that haunts him the most, was it 5 turnovers in that game with Vinny Testaverde? I don't think it was 7. I think it was 5 or 6 turnovers. I don't think I've seen 8 turnovers in a football game.
A Duke player broke the U over his knee. Just disrespectful.
Turned it upside down and then broke it over his knee. I'm gonna say it again though. The last 2 times you played Duke, you've beaten them by a combined score of 95-10. Mike, I legitimately feel bad for you on social media when that happens, because one of the great things in sports is to make fun of the allegiances of somebody else that you care about. And I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know if this is any worse than Middle Tennessee State. Maybe it can't be any worse than Middle Tennessee State. But these teams coming into the building and scoring 40 on you when they're nowhere programs, even though Duke's better than they've been.
Yeah. Scoring 40 on you, it's easy to score 40 when you've got drives of like 22, 24, 26, and a fumble 6. It's a bet. What's going on over there?
Heat broadcaster Jeremy Taché has made his entrance this morning by spiking a table on the floor behind him.
That's very unprofessional.
Gone pretty Hollywood already after his first weekend on the job.
He declared, I can't work like this. Also.
Appreciate it.
Jax would never give me this.
Yeah, the social media is fun. I'm actually having a little fun with it. It is worse than Middle Tennessee State only because Middle Tennessee State happened earlier this season, and you'd hope that that would be a wake-up call for people. It's going to take time, but I appreciate the supportive atmosphere that I have in here, being that we didn't talk a single word of Miami Hurricanes football last week after a win, because how fun is that? We have to talk about Jay Crowder for the 70th fucking time.
Because it was a 2014 win over Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, the 8 turnovers, that's a striking number, but to lose 5 fumbles in a game, that has to be a record. How do you lose all 5 of them? How do you not recover one fumble?
Tuck back under.
It's a weird pointy ball.
Yeah.
One has to bounce your way.
Yeah.
At least one.
It is a weird ball. It's not round. It takes funny bounces. I often say that.
When you're saying wake-up call, though, Mike, they're just bad. There's no
they're
wake-up
bad.
call. There's no lack of motivation there.
No, it's interesting. The season's gone a little sideways. Entering the Virginia Tech game, you can make an argument they were one of the more disciplined teams, and certainly in the conference. They were the least penalized team, and then they had 17 penalties in this game. They have the 8 turnovers. Historically, those are things like you and I point to when we see the graphic on the television and say coaching. It's things that we've said all the time. They allegedly have a good staff just because it's a super expensive staff, and things are going the wrong way. Now, I understand that they've lost a shed load of players. I think that this offseason comes a time for reevaluation. Right now, it's about weeding folks out. And we kind of called this when it was the Mario Lane Kiffin debate that wasn't actually a debate because they were all in on Mario. Schematically, we all kind of knew Lane would be a quick fix. And we've had questions about Mario Cristobal and his tactics ever since he burst on the scene down here as a head coach at FIU. He's a culture guy. He's a stat classes guy. He's a mentality guy. The mentality of these players right now, and Mario's now gone fully into just openly talking about it and throwing players under the bus, air quotes. It's not the type of team that he typically has success for. This is the way that we're married to. He has to get his classes and he has to get his guys. There's no real flexibility there for this thing to work. So patience. Patience is not a fun exercise right now, especially when boosters and the administration have devoted resources against this program in ways they've never had before. And right now the results are, we're backsliding from last year. That's if last year's team played this year's team, last year's team would win by a decent margin, you think, especially with the way that they were playing at the end of last year. So it's not good. Parents are openly complaining on Twitter. That's college football these days, and I think embrace the portal.
And those damn photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
Yeah,
photos. They keep sending them out of the attendance.
Yeah.
Like just enough.
Appreciate
like
it.
I'm not even like it's going at Mike and I'm getting offended by them now. It's like back off. All right. It's too much.
Wait, what do you mean? Because when I looked at the box score, ESPN said that there were 54,000 people there.
Look, in 2001, they averaged 46,000 people a game. There are more people at the games. It's just a big stadium. But look, man, I'm not going to get into it. They just got to win some friggin' football games. So it's a bummer. They're probably not going to make a bowl this year, and we'll go at it next year.
You don't think they're going to win 6 games?
I mean, if you look at the remaining schedule, they're at Florida State. They're
they're
they're home of Florida State, at Clemson, and you basically have
And
to
they have
win.
Pitt.
Yeah, you have to win all your other games beside that.
You got to win this game, and
You
it
could
looks
probably
like
beat Pitt.
you could probably beat Virginia. I mean, it's such a weird college football
but
season.
that's the
When they
thing,
lost to
right?
Middle Tennessee State.
The thing that's frustrating about what's happening is that the University of Miami has national championship aspirations because of the fact that,
Recalibrate.
No. I'm saying like at some point, they will want to get back to being a national championship team because there's an established pedigree at this school can do that. But in the interim, Randy Shannon and Al Golden and now Mario Cristobal and Manny Diaz before him are losing games in the ACC Coastal. They should be able to run away with any of these games based off the talent level, based off the recruiting rankings. This team is good enough to beat Duke. This team is good enough to beat Middle Tennessee. This team is good enough to beat Virginia. These are not good football programs.
Yeah, if you look at the composite talent rankings,
they should run away with this division every year.
I think they're 13th in the nation, but that's been the case for the last 20 years. They've had more talent than these teams.
but to me the frustration is that the talent is there. You can trip into talent in Miami. But
Their defensive line, like pro scouts will tell you, I had one pro scout say that's the best defensive line in the nation, like number 1 unit.
But then they gave up an 18-play drive to Duke, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
How is the coaching this bad?
The coaching is certainly a concern. They have a certain way. They have a married way. They're married to a certain style, and they don't believe that they have the talent nor the players with the mentality to carry out
then
their
adjust.
style. I understand.
They're paying him $80 million. One of the highest paid staffs in the country.
I hear you. You say adjust.
Move a little,
dude. They adjusted. They adjusted.
Clearly not well enough.
No, because
they lost to Duke.
Because they don't win. But they adjusted. The offense is different than it was when they lost to Middle Tennessee State. But there are certain things that I understand. Complain about the coaching, turnovers, undisciplined. I mean, when Tyler Van Dyke, who has the ability to slide protections and change plays at the line, when he goes up to the line of scrimmage on a 3rd and 5, and it is very obvious to everyone in that stadium that it is a jailbreak blitz. They are sending everybody, and he doesn't slide a protection, and he ends up getting hurt because he's got a half second before he gets into his 3rd step drop. He's 1 step in, and someone's in his face, and he hurts his shoulder, and he might lose millions of dollars because of that decision. Some of that's not on the coaches. Some of that is on the players. When Jalen Knighton, who has this unbelievable knack of having game-changing fumbles when he's not even getting hit hard, when he does that, that's not necessarily coaching. I am with you. The coaching is a huge, supreme disappointment considering how much they've paid for it. I wish that we had tacticians that could do with what they have on the field and maximize the results. We don't have that right now. It's kind of the book on Mario Cristobal. They'll be better talent-wise 4 years from now, but this is going to take some time, and that's a recalibration for everybody.
When you say last year's team would have been this year's team, isn't it mostly the same players that are playing against each other in this very strange hypothetical? So the difference would have to be coaching.
Restrepo's healthy.
No, I mean, you have Charleston
On which
Rambo.
team? Last year's team.
You have, the receivers are certainly way better than last year. The offensive line, we saw, reason to be excited about the offensive line and what Alex Mirabal is supposed to do. And now they're an entire mash unit. I'm not going to come here and say injuries because your 3rd string guy should potentially be as good as the 1st string guy that he's going against certainly Middle Tennessee State and Duke. Fact of the matter is they're not. They're just not. They're not that talented. And on top of that, they're super hurt. And on top of that, players are kind of checking out. And we're going to see a huge roster turnover next year. We're going to see a lot of players that just aren't down with this style. Mario is a grinder. He has some of the hardest practices that he shouldn't have because he doesn't have the depth to stand behind the types of practices that we have. We don't have these killers in the locker room, and that's what Mario has. You can agree with it or disagree with it. He only knows one way to succeed, and he does not have that kind of player right now.
For historical purposes, whether you go back to losing the last game at the Orange Bowl 47 or 49-0 to Virginia, or the Scott Clement or the Ryan Clement, Scott Covington years of probation, this feels like as bad as I've ever seen it.
This feels like Butch's first year. This feels like Randy Shannon's first year, where I think we went 5-7. It's a bad football team. You gotta find a way to beat FSU. That's what the season's all about right now. Because if you think social media is bad for you now, just wait till that one. I think after Middle Tennessee State, I know I certainly did. I was like, okay, this is not the year for the Coastal, and I'd like to see players improve. And for a brief moment, you took the positives with the North Carolina. You saw the offense adjust a little bit, but now it's just, oh my God, this is going in the wrong direction. Thankfully, we're in an era in college football where you can turn over a roster rather quickly, so hopefully it doesn't take as long. I happen to think that this is like 2 years away from being what we hoped it would be.
2 years away from being 10 years away, which is where we've been for about 20 years with this team. I do feel like when you're watching what is obvious regression, I don't think there's a motivation problem, but if I were to find a motivation problem, this combination of things would exist. Really, really hard practices, 17 penalties in a game, 8 turnovers in a game. Like I don't, you combine those ingredients together and that's where you will get kids to quit.
It's also just a different time. The makeup of, I'm not going to be like back in my day type of guy, but Mario's genuinely confused with this locker room. It's a weird dynamic for him. It's not something. If you talk to older players, they'll tell you, like all the cliches, like some of this stuff would just never be allowed. It would be self-governed. They would never be able to wrap their brains around being able to accept a loss against Duke. But they're just so used to it here. And I don't think that that's necessarily, it is a cultural thing, but it's a cultural thing within that locker room. Mario doesn't need to just get talented guys. Mario feels like he needs to get talented guys that are absolute dogs, that are killers, that are leaders, that have the mentality if someone drops a ball in practice, not only is a coach going to chew them out, but the players are going to join them in there. That's the type of team that he wants. You could agree with it, disagree with it, but he is not going to succeed, he feels, until he gets that.
Well, that does kind of feel like blaming the players when you still, like you said, you have a chance to still make a bowl game, at least salvage the rest of the season. But if guys are quitting on you in the locker room because you're saying in a press conference that they're not the right guys for this program, that's kind of a bad look too.
Well, you had one player's mom, and there have been a couple players' moms that have taken to social media, which is another new thing that Mario has to wrap his brains around.
But everyone has to.
He had to do that at
every
Oregon,
other team
too.
has figured it out.
Yeah, but like there was one mother, I won't mention the kid's name because it's been hard enough for him, but she said something to the effect of, it's really hard to get up for a game when your offensive coordinator's coming into the meeting room calling you the worst player in the nation and you're a whole bunch of bums. That's just, look, you sign Mario Cristobal. I mean, Dan, you know Mario for a while. Like, he's intense. He runs red. Like that. He wants his staff to be carrying out that culture for him, and it's just not working out. It's not a good mesh right now.
That's not the kind of coach that I want. I want someone more malleable than that, but that was what he learned from when he was an offensive lineman here. That's what Jimmy Johnson was, and you're speaking to a generational gulf. You're talking...
Yeah, it's harder to find those kids. Like, trust me, they're targeting those kids that have that dog in them, as a kid say in Twitter.
Wouldn't every coach say, I want to get the dogs?
No, not
Like,
necessarily.
It's just like a tough player.
But
right?
how's like a 52-year-old more out of touch than like some of these 70-year-old
how's
coaches?
a 52-year-old Cuban man with his upbringing out of touch with this generation?
Are you still talking about Mario Cristobal?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most obvious thing in the world.
That's a low blow.
I'm sorry,
I'm
Dan.
53.
I'm sorry. I had to do it. But he was a head coach a year ago. It's not like this is his first head coaching gig, but also, like, I wonder how concerned you are Now looking at Oregon sitting 6-1 with a huge win this weekend.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Michigan's offense looks good, even though they lost their offensive coordinator. They have a couple better players this year, I think, on their offense, but neither of those teams have really dropped off, having lost
That
Cristobal and
assistant
Gaddis.
coach of the year conversation that we had a couple of months ago looks funny now.
It does, and I think you could certainly criticize Mario for, number one, the decision. I mean, there were a lot of great names that he was interested in. Tennessee's offense seems to be working just fine. He was in on that offensive coordinator. Mario actually has a great eye for talent. Josh Gaddis being the exception. He was on Chip Kelly before anybody else. Yeah, I mean, the two examples that you just cited right now, I actually think are reasons for encouragement if you're a Miami fan. I see a lot of Oregon Ducks, and absolutely game day celebrate. Mario Cristobal decided to leave you. I'd rub it in his face too. But saying Oregon's good this year is not the own that you think it is. It's because they were 4-8 when Mario Cristobal got there, and he built that team into what it is. It wasn't just this Nike Chip Kelly gimmick thing. He got in there, stacked talent. And with Michigan...
Sounds like Mario propaganda.
No,
all of this.
Mario, I understand. Look, dude, I appreciate trying to hold me in check. Nothing's going to hold me in check more than the results of this season. Nothing's going to hold me in check more than Middle Tennessee State. The reality of the situation is he took over an Oregon job with a 4-win football team. Michigan, as great as they look right now, as dominant as that running game is right now, how many consecutive years were we firing Jim Harbaugh because it was embarrassing and didn't work? I wish it were like flipping a switch. It's not going to be like that for this type of coach.
Well, but
I did say with Lane, it was a much quicker fix. They did not entertain Lane, and I thought we needed an ass kicker to change the culture because I wasn't sure we'd be able to stand resources against it. That's where we're at right now. This is a factory reset with the Miami Hurricanes program. We thought we'd be able to microwave a Coastal, everybody there. The lowest possible expectation was maybe 4 losses. Maybe we lose 2 dumb ones this year. It has been a disastrous season. I think coaches are going to leave. I think even more players are going to leave. And we'll see what happens next year. But I think we're a couple of years away, honestly.
The only hope that I have is you look at other successful college football coaches, and there are disastrous first seasons on their record. And so if you believe that Mario Cristobal is indeed a program builder, you look at Georgia right now. When he took over when Kirby Smart took over in 2016, they went 8-5. They lost at home to Vanderbilt and at home to Georgia Tech. Like, there's some disastrous losses on that record. There's disastrous losses in Nick Saban's first year in charge of Alabama. And that's basically all you can hold on to because all other evidence suggests that Mario Cristobal has had a disastrous start to his time running the University of Miami. And the only hope is that mentality that you talk about, the recruiting you talk about, the program building elements will eventually take hold because there's a massive period of transition that's happening.
And if
here.
you just look at Mario, dude is wearing it. I mean,
it's got to be a suffering.
He has lost. No joke. Just from the eye test, it looks like he's lost 35 pounds since the start of the season. And I can tell you, like, that guy is just obsessed to an unhealthy degree. So if you're paying $80+ million for a coach that is all about intensity and football is life and all that kind of stuff, you have that guy. I'm not here to tell you anymore whether it will work. I do think that the talent will certainly be better 3 years from now. We will not have a talent discrepancy against the likes of Duke. When we watch the game, you'll be able to see the body types.
You didn't have a talent discrepancy, though. Your talent is better than Duke, and your talent is better than Middle Tennessee. Like,
even with all the injuries.
You didn't lose because they had better talent.
The gulf is not what it needs to be, especially after all the injuries. On their offensive line, they're out 3 starters. Their wide receiver room, their best wide receiver is a walk-on JUCO guy that just came on 2 weeks ago. The only unit that should absolutely be eating and dominating every time that's been consistently healthy has been that defensive line.
I do think what Whitty said is important, which is that other good head coaches have bad first seasons, but that's why I think it matters more what you do now and how you come back from this huge devastating home loss with 8 turnovers to kind of right the ship and keep your focus for the rest of the season. Because now you have 4 losses. If you go 4-8 the rest of the season, that's a way worse result than going 6-6 and playing in the Sun Bowl and like going into next season. I know it doesn't make a huge difference as a fan. You're still disappointed either way. But I think as a player and if you're a prospective recruit, you do view Cristobal differently if he's able to kind of like stay behind his guys and coach them into a result that's going to make this Duke loss look like it was crappy, and it was a low point for our season, but we came back and we re-answered for it.
Yeah.
Billy, did the press conference make you feel with Mario taking out players? Did it make you feel like their fault, not my fault? Their fault, not my fault?
I mean, it's not a good look, but like honestly, Mike being positive about Mario is really all you can do right now because you're stuck with him. Like, there's no way out with Mario. You have him for $80 million over 10 years. Like, he's going to be here for 5 or 6 years no matter what because you can't buy him out. So I guess try to be positive because it's not changing anytime soon, no matter what the results are.
Well, he's not.
That is the right takeaway. It's right on the head. What am I going to do? I can't fire the guy year one. It's
you don't
way
have
too
to,
expensive.
You don't have to fire him year one, but you are talking about how much he cares, which is not up for dispute. Most of these coaches care, and he does care deeply, and you are accenting the positive in a way that suggests that Mario's not at fault because he did change the offense. But when you tell me a scout is telling you defensive line best in the nation, it doesn't look like Georgia's defensive line has looked the last couple of years. Like, I don't know what that scout is seeing. I'm not watching the same thing that scout is seeing, where I see dominance up front, caving in offenses.
Mesidor is a pro. Jackson is a pro. Taylor is a pro. Nigel Kelly, the true freshman, looks like he's going to be a tremendous player for them. That defensive line is something serious. Talking about that actually gets more emotion out of me than talking about the game because we are wasting one of the great units in the country right now. I think while he was blaming the players, that's kind of a bit of a tone change because Mario has been certainly accountable in all his press conferences. He knows this is disastrous. Look at him. Look at him. Manny Diaz was also wearing it by the end of the season too. But it is very clear by looking at Mario Cristobal's face, like how he is internalizing this.
There is a be careful what you wish for situation happening with him. I cannot imagine the sleepless nights. He already doesn't sleep before this. I can't imagine how stressful this is to have this happen on his watch, this amount of howling, losing some fans in the building. But let's move on to last night's game with the Dolphins. That second half, I imagine, was hard for you guys to stay awake. No?
I literally went to sleep at halftime. And I woke up and I saw Whitty's stupid 0-0 tweet. And I was like, well, I guess I didn't miss anything. Chris was at the game, though.
I left early, though, because just today was, You
left early?
A night game. It was one of those things that I was like, I'm going to this game. I left early. It's just like, I saw this in my future. I was like, I don't want to be tired.
But you're still tired.
Yeah.
I am tired, but I'm always tired on Monday. I'm normal tired, though. I'm good.
Yeah.
That's some real dad shit, though.
It
leaving.
Honestly,
though,
I felt so good about myself when the score stayed the same, and I'm like beating. I was home by like 10 minutes after the game. I would have been there till like 1 a.m. if I stayed to the end. The traffic is insane getting out of there.
Billy, before the game, was just generally worried for Tua, like a parent.
Yeah, I was.
Like one of those
and he wasn't
Kane's
doing
mothers.
anything to make me feel any better, diving into people head
God,
first.
What is he doing?
I love
He's
it though,
playing
man.
football.
I gotta be honest with you. When I was seeing it, I was like, yeah, and I was like, don't do that, but yeah, that's what I want.
Well, I don't know if you guys listened to the ESPN Daily today with Pablo and Alex Smith, but Alex Smith said that unless you're sliding feet first into like nothing as a quarterback, it's actually more dangerous in his opinion than taking. I don't think taking that hit in particular is what he was saying was more safe. But he got his only concussion, I guess, as a player sliding and getting.
No, I understand what
tackled.
I understand what he's saying.
I thought it was a good point, but yeah, he took a big hit.
You also lost a leg.
You're exposed when you're sliding like that, and if a guy hits you now, you feel protected by law there, but you're going to get hit by someone who's going to get penalized. I think that's what happened if you're sliding. But Tua said, "Coach, I'm sorry, I needed that." That's the quote from Tua, that he needed to go out there and get some violent physical
I love
contact.
You got a little taste of blood in your mouth. That's what you need to feel alive again in football. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's why you go back into the game after you've had a concussion and it's why he
Well,
played this week.
allegedly.
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 Guys, there's like 7 concussion protocols every week on every team, and he went through the protocol. He's
Oh my
cleared.
God, we're
Kenny
not doing
Pickett
this
was coming
again.
back.
I'm
We're
just
not
saying,
doing
like,
this
why are we
again.
acting like he's playing football? He's back from the
Segue.
concussion protocol.
Did you guys think after the Dolphins opening drive that it was going to be like a 50-3 final score? Because I did. I was so nervous, but then nothing else happened for the
Although
entire game.
the Dolphins had another good offensive drive on their next drive, and I think they went for it on a 4th down and didn't get it. Their first
No, they
three,
kicked the
They
field
kicked
goal.
the field goals.
Yeah, I mean, their first 3 offensive possessions were really good, and then Mike Tomlin must have looked at the iPad for 1 second. Oh, all they do is throw over the middle. Let's stop that. And then the offense completely shut down after
That's
that.
not really the Steelers' defensive strong suit, though. So I am surprised as anyone else that they were able to contain the Dolphins' offense after what we saw in the first quarter. I also thought, I mean, from a Steelers fan perspective, the Steelers still had a chance to win that game if Kenny Pickett just maybe, I don't know, runs out of bounds instead of throwing that last interception. So I guess it ended up being somewhat of a decent game, even though it looked like the first quarter versus the fourth quarter were different football teams on the field.
There is an intrinsic thing that I think is the exclusive domain of gamblers. And I am not too bullish on Kenny Pickett just because when he has the ball with 2 minutes left and it's a 7.5-point spread, I feel it's more likely that it's going to be a pick six. And I don't think you can ever be a good football player if that's a feeling that's going through my mind.
I agree. So like I saw a lot of chatter about like the Steelers are probably going to get a pretty high first round pick because they're so crappy this year, and there's a ton of really good college football players that are going to be in the draft. So is Pickett the guy? And I'm like, he started 2 games. Like he's played 2.5 NFL
He's also
games.
31 years old.
Yeah, I mean he is a little bit older than most rookie quarterbacks, but I'm like, can we talk about this after the end of the season? Like, do we have to do it now?
I can see that the Miami Hurricanes football program has not been relevant 20 years ago when Kenny Pickett beat them and they had a chance to be the number 1 team in the college
Jessica,
football
though,
playoff.
the whole timeline has been sped up at the position with the Tua, Burrow, Herbert class because they all came in, because there wasn't a waiting period, and because Burrow is now the first quarterback ever to have 2 500-yard, 4-touchdown games. I feel, am I wrong about this? That Tua and Herbert and Burrow playing immediately has sped up the measurements on every quarterback.
think-
You don't get to sit
yeah.
around like Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre
I think it
anymore.
goes back even farther than that. But I'm like just like the college football season hasn't even ended yet. Like you have NFL fans being like, well, if we can get Will Levis in the top 5, I'm like, Kentucky. What are we talking about? Kentucky might end up losing the next 4 games in a row on their schedule, except they probably won't beat. They probably won't lose to Louisville.
Rookie
But
wage scale.
it's just crazy.
Changed
Like
everything.
it's crazy. And I guess that's what happens when those are the talking points after you play on primetime and your rookie quarterback throws 2 interceptions. But I'm like, all right, it was a second game on the road on Sunday Night Football in primetime. Like I'm kind of like, I would have loved to see him score a touchdown, score the go-ahead touchdown in the end. But like, it's not Ben Roethlisberger.
I mean, Arizona cut bait with Josh Rosen very early and got Kyler Murray and felt immediately rewarded by the decision. It's just reality of
and
of
they've
pro
won
football
a
these
lot
days.
of Super Bowls since then. So.
But also for me with Pickett, what I was impressed by was I agree with you, Mike. I like by the end of the game, I was hoping the Dolphins won, but the Steelers would cover. And I thought that the Steelers, I thought that Kenny Pickett was throwing a pick six. And to be fair to him, his last 2 drives, he was pretty good at moving the ball. The issue was that, frankly, the MVP of the game for the Dolphins was Thomas Morstead, because you're basically saying Kenny Pickett drive 90 yards, and I just don't think he's the quarterback that's driving you 90 yards.
There
right
was
now.
some good punting in that game. Oh, quality
Exceptional
punting.
Not from
That
the
guy,
Steelers.
that guy's a vibe on the sideline. Morstead, I was like sitting like 8 rows up where he was just chilling. He's bouncing the ball like it's a basketball. He might as well be dribbling through his legs.
But we already established that's not a round ball.
I'm
for
just
him.
saying, though, for him
incredible.
it is.
Very pointy.
He's very impressive.
Don't get me started on the Steelers' offensive play calling, by the way, because that's.
I do want to get you started. Go.
Honestly, no.
I wasn't really watching the game. I did see
refuse.
I did see that final drive, just like saying, "Dear God, please, Kenny Pickett, hold on." But it's my understanding that Tua got away with multiple
4.
dropped
4 of
interceptions.
them. There were 4 of them.
That's not great.
I mean, he's good for at least one of those a game. the number of times that oblong-shaped ball did not end up in the hands of the Pittsburgh Steelers was startling.
It ended
How
up
many
in the
times?
hands, and then it fell out,
Out
of their
of the hands, like
His
Mike
own
Evans
receivers
yesterday.
dropped it too a bunch of times.
It's just like
Did the ball get slippery? Are they greasing the balls like the poles
Like
in
the poles in
Philadelphia?
Philly.
That's not working.
We've buried the lead. We should have started once again with the agenda that is most important to South Florida. Those need to be the permanent uniforms. That game is just an absolute joy to look at. Aesthetically, so pleasing. I hate their current uniforms.
beautiful at night as well.
It's just that uniform set is just a chef's kiss. It is incredible.
I'm so bummed that both the Hurricanes and the Dolphins aren't relevant enough to play night games. That stadium looks awesome at night. It looks so cool at night. They start the opening sweeping intro. Like, this is an awesome place to watch a game.
So like the Hurricane start times, it's just like you're a bad team. You're a bad team.
We're noon
They're
on
not
bad-
even on TV.
I think we're all, like at an 11:30 start. Like
Yeah.
game day's still picking, and we're like midway through the
We're
first quarter.
noon on Bally Sports
So-
for the end of the season.
So Miami has this uniform set that Adidas made called Miami Knights. Miami Knights. You have to have a primetime game to wear these Miami Knights uniform. We're going to be in all black uniforms against FSU with an 11:45 kick.
What about McDaniel on 4th and 3 at the Pittsburgh 14, up 16-10, going for it? I think McDaniel walks around life everywhere in the world saying, I can always get 3 yards. I can get 3 yards
but a handoff
whenever.
straight up the middle with Chase Edmonds? The decision, whatever. I mean, against Kenny Pickett, I wouldn't have minded kicking a field goal there because you have a 2-score lead against Kenny Pickett. That's as good as done.
It's a bad decision. It's a bad decision to go for it. It's a bad play call.
If you throw a drag route to Tyreek Hill, you can't really have too much of a go. But a handoff to Chase Evans was
No, but
dreadful.
I
in
get-
that game.
Chase Edmonds, I think, is the main problem because I thought Mostert was actually having a good game, Dan. There's the most encouraging sign from that game outside of winning it, because 16 points in the NFL, you don't necessarily always win those games, is that Mostert seems to be coming online and that running game is starting to get bigger chunk plays and have averages over 5 yards a carry.
They put up the stat during the game that he is on 16% of his runs, 10 or more yards. It's second in the league. So he does, and he did it in the first half of that game. They just kept handing him the ball and he'd get 10 or 12 yards. But going back for a second, though I want my coach to be aggressive, I love a coach, generally speaking, who is saying to himself, I believe my offense can get 3 yards against whomever, whenever, don't care about the game situation. But you have to take a 2-score game there against Kenny Pickett. You're at the 14-yard line. It's 4th and 3. It's 16-10. You got to make that game 19-10 and dare Pickett to drive down the field twice on you to score.
Did I imagine it, or did Collinsworth and Tirico say that after he did that, they were like, well, the analytics say slight advantage for kicking a field goal here.
Right, which you never hear that. You never hear the analytics.
Exactly.
The analytics are in favor of the conservative decision. That also pairs with how he handled the end of the first half with 2 timeouts, and they're huddling on the field, and they ran a 4-yard running play, and then instead of taking a timeout, they tried to rush a play on 3rd and 1 to get a first down, and then took a false start, so they gained about 12 yards, and you had a minute and 30 to start the drive, and you finished that sequence with 35 seconds on the clock. They did eventually kick a field goal, but it was immensely frustrating to watch them handle, and it was the first time that Mike McDaniel looked like a rookie head coach, and if they had lost that game, he would have been absolutely skewered after that one. A 4-game losing streak, and how he handles some of those decisions, he's fortunate that defense bailed him out with that interception late.
I think he nailed it with the Chase Edmonds. That to me is the only issue that I have with it. He came from a place in San Francisco when they were really clicking at the end of the season. They would call run plays too, but they would put the balls in the hands of their playmakers like Deebo
4th
Samuel.
and 3?
I would just
Three's a long way to
Mike,
go.
Oh, don't call plays, call players. Find a way to get the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands.
Yeah.
Buffalo, I mean, it's easy to do with the quarterback, but if they have a 3rd and 2 or 4th and 1, Josh Allen's keeping it. Like, just call the best possible player to have an impact on the game. Chase Edmonds, it would appear, was not a good signing.
Forgive me for this because I objected last week to Greg Cody, his analysis as a journalist being emotional based on how someone did or didn't do for his fantasy team. I think Mike's analysis right now is being skewed by having the Steelers 6.5, plus 6.5. He didn't want them kicking a field goal in that
7.5.
situation.
No. That was a great drawn up play. Just
Like,
keep feeding Chase
You can't
Edmonds.
sit here making the argument that they shouldn't go up 2 scores on Kenny Pickett when you trust your defense.
A lot of teams turn that down now. I think Doug Peterson, he turned down the chance to make it a 7-point game from a 4-point game. A lot of coaches are making these decisions now where they're not factoring in what like our sort of traditional methods of, well, if you're down 9, you go for 1 so that you have a chance on the last drive to go for 2 and tie the game. They're not sort of playing that conventionally anymore.
But Dan called it. Like, it's when you're going up against a struggling offense with Kenny Pickett at the helm. I mean, a 2-score game seems
I don't like
you
that
have
we're
this
using Pickett as a slur.
I mean,
Like,
I would have used Trubisky if he were out there.
I would rather you use Trubisky.
Young quarterback who hasn't
Thank you,
been in
Dan.
that situation a lot. You mentioned Doug Peterson, though, Whitty. That was 4th and an inch, and I heard 4 times during that game that Trevor Lawrence is 6'5" because of how he was sneaking for a yard in that game. And the announcers kept saying it was 4th and inches. It's not 4th and 3 where you think you can get it with a sneak. But since Mike mentions just throw it to Tyreek Hill, he'll get you 3 yards. Nobody can cover him moving laterally.
I would just pitch it to Tyreek Hill. If I needed a 4th and 3, the play that I would call, if I'm going to run a running play, it's Tyreek, you're in the backfield. Swear to God, just have your best football player touch the ball.
Can I ask you guys whether it can now be stated flatly? I mean, maybe Cincinnati would be the only place I'd find an objection, that the Dolphins have the best duo of wide receivers in the NFL. That's correct now. I can just say that. It's either Chase Higgins or these two, correct? And you'd take, if I'm guessing most of you, if we put the 4 of them on the field, are taking Higgins 4th there.
Yeah, but Cincinnati will just go, we have the trio, though. We have Tyler Boyd. And where's Cedric Wilson? Where is Cedric Wilson? I heard so much about Cedric Wilson entering this season. Where is he? Who is your third guy? I can't name it. Kraft? Is it
It's
Kraft?
not River K. Kraft. It is not.
Is it Kraft? Who is the third receiver? Do you have one?
Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
saw,
Trent Sherfield.
I saw somebody.
Is it Jeff Ogden?
Somebody put up the idea of trading for Judy in Denver.
Reuniting Tua with Judy. Yeah, they appear. Man, God. Oh, now I'm angry. You just mentioned the Denver Broncos, and I want to leave. I'm leaving.
Okay, he has left. The Broncos have done that to a lot of people today. I mentioned this on the post game we did yesterday, but why is Adam Schefter reporting as part of the news that Russell Wilson would be out? Why is he reporting how badly Russell Wilson tried to play and did his most and he wanted to play so badly, but the doctors and the coach, they dragged him out of the game? Why? Schefter's reporting that because he's doing the work of an agent, correct?
Either that or the Broncos. Maybe the Broncos want to have some triumphant narrative. I mean, everyone is incentivized to make Russell Wilson look like a hero there, but it's very clearly some sort of PR agenda. We talked about on the Sunday Night Show. Like there's an apparatus around Russell Wilson that wants to make you believe something about Russell Wilson that your eyes don't tell you. And part of that apparatus is making him look like a hero when he's wearing the shades upside down on top of his hat. Yeah, it was a baseball move. It was kind of strange.
Was, yeah. He has the Oakleys upside down. It's like we're kind of in the shade here in Denver. There's not that much sun.
Yeah,
you don't need the Oakleys.
The sun
for some
goes down
reason.
at like 3 p.m. in Denver. What are we doing?
Guy's a ham.
It does?
Yeah, he's a ham.
Whittingham.
No, I mean the sun thing.
Do you think that Stugotz is going to be here today? I know that he has alleged lacrosse mitzvah, delayed flights, and everything else, but you expect him to actually arrive today?
I do. At some point, he'll be here. I say that with a great deal of right.
He wants to be here so bad.
He couldn't stop. He couldn't drive the plane fast enough to get over here. How bad he wanted to be here, but he just missed
He only
it by
got
this
an hour
much.
of sleep
Yeah,
last
by
night,
this
so he can
much, yeah.
catch the plane back. It's a triumphant return when he gets here.
The Jets won yesterday. The reason I want to talk to him is about the Jets being 5-2. You guys want to guess? Because he doesn't have a quarterback. And when you say you don't know if you have a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. But you guys want to guess how many passes in that game the Jets, who were winners yesterday, threw that and completed that were over 5 yards in the air?
3.
3 is the exact number.
Let's go!
How bad is that? 3 for the game. For the game, over 5 yards in the air. But how is that even possible that you win a football game in the modern age that way? The New York football teams are going to try to win games in the modern
What the
passing age.
Steelers did the last 2 years, Dan.
Oh, my God.
And they won it easily too. Like that wasn't really that much effort. Like once they went up 10-9, game over. Like there was nothing for them to do.
Did you just do the blackjack dealer leaving
Yeah.
the table?
Yeah. Great.
They do like a reach into the sleeve thing
No,
sometimes. being the
Denver
blackjack dealers.
was throwing in. They were going to be throwing in.
talking about Denver. I just came back.
Denver was 4th and 2 at the Jets 30, playing for the tying score, winning him. That game was awful. Denver needs to be relegated. They need to relegate Denver.
Fire that coach now. Wow. Fire that coach. That coach is a bum. He will never be good. He stinks. That coach stinks.
Did you bet Denver too?
I did this time. I did. I figured that's an upgrade at quarterback, right?
Mike, you're
Over Mr. Unlimited.
Didn't you fade both New York teams?
I did. This is a bad weekend.
Jacksonville.
This was my worst gambling weekend. This one, I mean, who could have seen Tampa Bay losing? At halftime, everybody was just, okay, we're going to account drop on this Tampa Bay ML.
It's not just Tampa Bay losing. It's Tampa Bay and Tom Brady scoring fewer points than any team that played the sport yesterday. They were pointless. I mean, they scored 3 points, but Tom Brady, a team with Tom Brady, scored fewer points than any team playing football yesterday.
That drop from Mike Evans is bad. I mean, we're going to get into it a lot nationally. The storyline, obviously, is Rodgers and Tom Brady looking as done as we can recall in recent memory. And then now they've both played long enough that this has been a storyline around them, and they always find a way to bounce back. And in that division, Tom Brady is certainly going to, because they're going to host a playoff game, and we're going to do this whole thing counting them out, and they're going to have a home playoff game and knock somebody off and keep going, and then we'll be back on the Tom Brady thing. In terms of Aaron Rodgers, though, if you look at that schedule for Green Bay, I think they're done. I think they're toast.
They're going to trade for a receiver for sure.
What? They should be sellers. They should be like look at do the win-loss thing. They just lost to the Commanders. Now next game with their season on the line, you know where it is? Buffalo. Buffalo coming off a bye. Sunday Night Football, Halloween weekend. How?
You mentioned things that haven't happened in a while, okay? The Jets, we've mentioned that they have not had a 4-game winning streak since 2015. Brady hasn't had a losing record through week 7 since 2002. So it's been 20 years since Brady was in the position that he's in right now. And Rodgers, Mike, this is the worst 7-game stretch of his entire career. And he had no 3rd down conversions yesterday and no 4th down conversions yesterday. And his receivers were dropping the ball all over the place, but they are useless on offense. He's throwing the ball only behind the line of scrimmage more than any quarterback in the sport. They cannot, they miss their 2 deep threats. It's something that's obvious.
I mean,
they can't stretch the field.
And it was weird because Sammy Watkins came back. You know, I was puzzled. I mean, they got Sammy Watkins back.
They had a 28-yard play and a 22-yard play, and that was it.
Was that the lateral? Was that the final play? They stink. They stink. Green Bay's bad. They failed Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers also failed Aaron Rodgers, and also Aaron Rodgers was not good. He was not good. Tom Brady's getting hit more because that was a more embarrassing loss. Tom Brady looks certainly better than Aaron Rodgers did.
Tom Brady is going to be the story today because these things aren't allowed to end well. We never allow them to end well. And it's only been 7 games, but he had the hero's exit in a playoff game, slinging it against the Rams, never once looking like he did yesterday. It's not just that that's the worst Tom Brady has looked this season. We've never seen Tampa look like that when Tom Brady's their quarterback. Not like that. Rodgers will throw up a 38-7 stinker that they lose in week 1 against that team. They have now gone to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was a 9.5-point favorite. Carolina, dumping McCaffrey, was a 13-point underdog in that game. I'm sorry, the Steelers were a 9.5-point underdog, and the Panthers are 13-point underdog. And once the Panthers went up 14-0, there was going to be no, oh, you've left Tom Brady too much time stuff. Like you saw watching that game. They've got no chance.
I'm old enough to remember year one of Tom Brady in Tampa. There was a Thursday night football game in which, remember, he became a meme because he thought it was the wrong down. And they lost at Chicago to Nick Foles, 20-19, and we were doing the same exact thing. They won the Super Bowl that year. I'm not going to do that in that weak division. If they were in the NFC East, if they were in the NFC North like Aaron Rodgers is, I'd say they'd be done. But they're going to win that division. They're going to have a home game.
I'm not saying they're done. I'm just saying they looked like the worst team in the league the last 2 weeks because they were playing against teams that were viewed as the worst teams in the league.
I mean, Carolina traded its best player in Christian McCaffrey. They fired their coach. They basically announced through their transactions that they were punting on this season in trying to get additional draft capital. That is a hand-delivered win for a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know what's happening over there. The last 2 weeks, when they played Kansas City, and Kansas City I think we all agree is good on Sunday Night Football, Tom Brady outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that game. If they didn't fumble that opening kickoff, that game is a one-score game at the end, and we're talking about like, oh, those two teams might possibly meet again. 2 weeks later, and I can't explain what's happened to that Tampa Bay offensive line, why dependable receivers are dropping the ball. I don't necessarily have the answers, but and you know, Dan, I love all NFL 32. But it did warm my heart a little to see P.J. Walker and the Green Lizard take it to the two greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen. X can give it to you.